topic is going to be beekeeping. I know it's hard to believe, me as a beekeeper wanting to talk about bees, but if anybody is interested in getting started, it is a wonderful hobby. I have found the bees to be so amazing, and they give you so much more than you could ever imagine. But what I see from new beekeepers is that they jump right into it thinking that it's something that they can just pick up a package, which means 3 or 4 or 5 pounds of bees, and just get started. But what they really need to do is get a little bit of a background about beekeeping before they get started. So the time that we're taping this show is in the middle of November. We just happen to have a beautiful day, so we're outside. But now is a really good time to get started thinking about beekeeping for the next year, because there's a lot of things that you can do during the winter months. Reading is really important, going online, going to YouTube, watching as many videos as you can, and talking to beekeepers. This is all great, but what you really need to do after that is get into the hives. So I totally recommend taking a class, getting a mentor, somebody that really knows what they're doing, so that you can not have to have the problems that they had when they were beginner beekeepers. So the best place to start would be reading books. Okay, there's a couple of different books that I would recommend as a beginner beekeeper, just to get yourself started, because there's quite a bit of vocabulary, and once you know it, you'll be so much better off. So my personal suggestion is Beekeeping for Dummies. They came out with a 2nd edition this year, and this book has lots of pictures. It's an easy read. It's even got colored pictures in here, but it's an easy read. It's got some little cartoons. You can find anything that you need in here. This is a great place to start. If you're a beekeeper, or if you're someone that likes more technical kind of stuff, you'll want to continue on, and I hope that you do. The next book that I would recommend is This Idiot's Guide for Beekeeping. The next book that I would suggest is Idiot's Guide for Beekeeping. And this book is great because it shows organic ways to try to keep bees and ways to look at things without using medications, which I do think is a really good way to go, because we need to try to get away from medications. We need to try to build our bees' immunities and try to make them be able to live in our world on their own. So this is a great book to use as a reference as well. And then once you go on from there, there's all kinds of books on the markets. But there's Natural Beekeeping. This is by Ross Conrad. He's from Vermont, and that's a good book to read, but you want to know what you're talking about before you read this book. And then also The Backyard Beekeeper. This is a good book for beginners as well, but I found that there are a few more technical things in here, and my personal preference would be the Beekeeping for Dummies book. But you can go right ahead and read whatever you want. Read as many as you can. And what you'll find with beekeeping is the more people that you talk to, the more answers you're going to get, more different ideas on how to do something. So read as much as you can, take in as much information as you can, and then make your decision on your own. What we're going to do today is look at a few tools and the equipment that are available out on the market. There's different kinds of hives. There's the Langstroth hive. The Langstroth style hive is a hive that is vertical. It has boxes on it, and I'll show you what those look like. There's also a top bar hive, and a top bar hive is horizontal, and so the bees grow their hive this way instead of upward. Both of them are great for whatever purpose you're looking for. It all depends on what you are looking for. So if you're looking for honey and you're looking for lots of bees, you probably want to go with a Langstroth. If you're looking for pollination and some comb honey, maybe a little honey towards the end of the season, then you can go with the top bar. They both, again, have their pros and cons, but it's all whatever you're interested in. So today we're going to start with a Langstroth hive. So the bottom starts with this landing board. This landing board is great because when bees come in with pollen and nectar, they can be pretty tired. So as the bees come into the hive, they'll land on here, and then they'll walk up into the hive. So that is the landing board. This is called the bottom board. It goes on top of the landing board. And always we paint the outside of our hives, never the inside. So this would be the landing area where they'd be coming in. And the paint is just to help it so that it lasts a little bit longer, to keep it weatherized. From there we would go with either a deep hive body, which is this size here. This hive body here is where the brood will be. The brood are the eggs, and the larva that will build your hive size. So that's what we have here. If you didn't want to go with a deep hive body, what you'd have is 2 deep hive bodies if you were going to go with this method. You could go with mediums. So a medium frame, I'll just take this off for now. A medium frame would be this size here. You can see the difference in the heights. So what we try to do is we try to have the hive about 1.5 feet, 2 feet high for the brood chamber. So this is going to be a medium hive here. And then we'll put this one on too. Actually, this one here is a shallow. Again, you can see the difference in size here. I try to stay with deeps or mediums just because when you get out into the bee yard, it makes it very hard to try to change and exchange frames from one hive to the other if they're all different sizes. So I try to stay with either deeps or mediums, but I just happen to have this one here. And as I show you this one here, this one would be for your honey. This would be a super, what we call something where they will take in all of their honey. This one has enough room for 9 frames, and we do that so that we can have thicker frames that will have more honey on them so that when we extract them, it'll be easier to take the wax coverings off. You'll learn a lot more of this as you become a beekeeper. But I'm going to just put this on for an example. So what we would do is we would have 3 hive bodies. This would be our brood chamber. So we line them up, and what we would do is we would place a hole probably in this section here so that the bees can come in and out from the bottom, as well as a little hole in the top part here. That just gives them a little bit more airflow as well, and so it just helps the bees along on their journeys to get back in and out of the hive with their nectar and pollen. Now you have a choice on what kind of frames you're going to use. There are different frames available on the market. The frames that we have are this one here, which is all plastic. It's very durable, it's hard, and what we do is we either paint on some wax or spray some sugar water on it to encourage the bees to draw the comb out. The comb is made by wax that they have little wax glands on their bodies. They take that wax and chew it up. It's almost like sweat glands almost, but they're little wax places. So they take the wax, chew it up, and they make it into the comb that you'll see in the regular hives. So they do all of that work. So they just need something to get it started on. Sometimes they even just have a little piece of foundation, and I'll go into that a little bit later. So there's your plastic. The next one, and that was white plastic. The next one I'll show you is black plastic. The hives are dark inside, and so a lot of times they say that the black is better for seeing the eggs when you're looking at them. We try to look at them over our shoulder to see them because they're very, very tiny. So sometimes they say that the bees like the black frames better than the white. It's hard to say. I've tried both, and they are both just about the same for me. Again, these are still plastic. I don't use plastic anymore if I can help it, but it is good to have around if you need it in a jiffy. The next one would be a wax foundation, a plastic foundation with a wood frame. This one here is pretty durable. You can take the plastic foundation out if it gets dirty or if it needs to be changed, and you can keep the wood frame, so that does help you save a little bit of money. And then my preference would be a wax foundation with a wooden frame. Now you don't have to do what I do because, again, everybody does whatever they want to in beekeeping, and there's so many different ways to do it that you have to make your own choice. But my choice would be a wooden frame, and I like to put my frames together myself, but you can get them already manufactured together. A wood frame with wax foundation. This is wired wax foundation, so it gives a little bit more support because there's a lot of weight on these, and when they have honey in them, in the comb, and we use them in the extractor, a lot of times something can happen where they'll warp or they'll break. So the metal wires will help you so that your wax won't fall out and you won't have to change your frames quite so often. But we do change our hives, our frames in our hives every 3 to 5 years. That's just for health. So the way that we keep this in is there's these little pins on the sides. You can either use those, or you can also use wire that you would string in the little holes that are at the ends. So you could do something like that. And then there's a little piece of wood at the bottom that holds the piece of foundation in. So as you can see, it's pretty durable, but you do have to be careful, that you don't stick your fingers through it or drop it and have it break, because it is wax and it will fall apart. So those are the different kinds of frames that we can put into a hive. And again, because you have deep hive bodies or mediums or shallows, you want to make sure that if you do buy your wax and your frames, that you get the correct size for the box that you're using as well. Because if you don't, then that's a problem, and you'll end up with long frames that don't fit inside of your mediums, and it's really tough. So let me see, besides this, there's also this frame here that's got wires on it. This is called a queen excluder. People use these to keep the queen down below or up above, wherever they want her to be. She can't fit through these slats. And so when we want to manipulate our hive in a certain way and not have her lay eggs in a certain area, well, where say we want to have honey, then what we'll do is we'll put this in so she can't go through it. So say, for example, we were going to have all of our brood down at the bottom. We'd stick this on here, put this on there. The queen would stay down below, and this would be our honey chamber. So that way your honey is nice and clean. You don't have any eggs in it, and it's much easier to manipulate. And you know that she's down below. Sometimes the bees don't like to come through it, so I don't use a queen excluder unless I really know that that's going to be the area that I'm going to place my honey. This here, and these are all typical used pieces that I have. So as you can see, this is the inner cover, and this has red stuff on it. This is called propolis, and propolis is it's a bee glue. This is something that they get from pitch on trees, and it really is hard. If I took my tool and scraped it, it would almost be like powder, but it's really hard. You can't rip it off. So you'd have to take your hive tool, which is very sharp. So you can see that it almost turns into a powder, but I have to really scrape in order to get that off. Some people like propolis. It has some medicinal purposes, such as, or just as honey does, or pollen, or royal jelly, things like that. So everything in the hive pretty much is good for you. Some people like comb honey, and comb honey is something that you can take the honey out of and just chew on a little bit. It's just the wax that's left over. So you've got a whole hive here. You've got your landing board, your bottom board, and I've got a little visitor here, just visiting, checking it out. You've got your 3 hive bodies. You've got your queen excluder, your inner cover, and then we finish that off with an outer cover. The outer cover, or top cover, is going to protect the hive from any moisture that might come in. It's got a metal cover here, and that just is on top of wood, and we just put this on the hive so that it protects it and keeps the bees warm or cool in the summer. So it matters what time of year it is. I'm not going to go into a whole class on beekeeping, but this is the kind of stuff that you would want to look at as equipment. It is going to matter what time of year it is as to how you're going to manipulate your top cover, but there's a lot of manipulating when you go into a Langstroth hive. There are different things that you can wear. There's jackets that you can buy, there's veils, I should have brought a couple of other veils, but this is my preference. But there's veils that just go over your head. There's, as I said, jackets. There's also suits. This is a part of a suit that I had a few years ago, and this one actually had a veil that zipped on to the top. These I find are very hot, and I find that jackets are hot for me as well. Unless you're going to go in and you have a dozen or more hives, or you're going to be in your hives all day, which I wouldn't suggest either, you probably don't need something this big. So my suggestion would be to go with a shoulder veil. My attire is pretty much what I wear out to the hives. I usually will tuck my pants into my socks just to make sure that no bees go up my legs, because that's not fun. And then I just wear a regular t-shirt just to stay cool. You want to wear clean clothes because bees don't like perspiration. They don't like coffee. They don't like alcohol. They're pretty straight, so you want to be clean. So anyway, this is the veil that I wear. It's called a shoulder veil. It has little armholes, and it's easy to wear. It's got a Velcro strap on the back of the hat. So when I put this on, it doesn't move around, and so it's easy for me to go into the hives because I don't have to worry about my hat falling off or bees coming up my shirt or anything like that. So this is what I typically wear in the hive, and that's pretty much whenever I go into the hive. In the spring, you can go into the hives without a veil, but my recommendation as a new beekeeper would be definitely to wear a veil, and also to wear gloves if you don't feel comfortable going in without them. These gloves here are made out of cowhide. They slip on. They're called ventilated gloves. These are a little bit big for me, and I would usually wear a medium, excuse me, a small. These are a medium. I would usually wear a small size because it's really great if you're going to wear gloves to wear gloves that really fit. So you want them to be a little bit tight. So these to me would be a little bit cumbersome and a little too big. But I wanted to show you these today anyway. So when you do get your gloves, if you want to go someplace and try them on, that wouldn't be a bad idea either. We're lucky in this area because we have a beekeeping distributor called New Hampshire Honeybee. It's Bee Tree Farm and the New Hampshire Honeybee in Gilsum, New Hampshire. And they sell all kinds of products that are related to beekeeping. Pretty much everything that I've gone over today you can get from them. The reason why I bring this pail with me is because I have bees in other locations besides my house. And so when I use my smoker, which is this apparatus, it's hot and it takes a while for it to cool down. So what I usually do is I bring this aluminum bucket with me and I place that in my car so that things don't catch on fire. As I said, this is hot. This is a bellows, and what happens is we start a fire in here and then we close this up, use the bellows, and this looks like smoke but it's just soot, but I use the bellows to let the bees know that I'm coming into the hive and to mask my scent. Some people will say that it's to make them think that there's going to be a forest fire, and that could be too. But what I use it for is to mask my scent more so. If I get stung, which doesn't happen very often, but you do have to be careful of that. If I do get stung, sometimes I'll smoke the area, and that will mask the pheromone because there's a smell that the bees put off when they sting you. And that alerts the other bees to know that there's an intruder and that they should, pay attention. It's nothing really to worry about, but what I do just as a precaution is I just spray the area. And what I will do also is take the stinger and pull it out with my fingernail so that it doesn't stay in my skin and keep pumping the venom in. So those are a few of the little tools that I have that I bring with me. And then my hive tools. I have two different hive tools. The first one that I ever used was this type here. This is great because you can scrape things. It has an area where you can pull out nails if you needed to when you're building your frames, or you can use this to manipulate and to pull out and to push open. I like this tool, but my favorite tool is this one here. I do bring both, but this is the one that I use most often. This tool here, as you can see, has been used quite a bit, and I probably should just scrape it off and clean it down to, back to the metal. And I will do that soon. But this is my favorite tool because this end here can be used to pry your frames out. When you're in a hive, these are really loose right now. You can see that they can be moved around very easily. But as you've been in a hive for a while and the bees have done what bees do best, and that's to gunk up their hive, you'll need something to pry your frames out with. So I pry them out with this. It makes it really nice to pull your frames out with. So I use that a lot. Also, this end here, just like the other tool, you can take and in your hive, you can take and break the connection between the frames. So it makes it really nice to be able to manipulate things in your hive, and this is the tool that I use most often. As you become a beekeeper and learn more about it and become more comfortable with it, you'll learn that you can actually hold your tool and your smoker at the same time and do different things. You'll learn how to put things down when you need them, keep them where you need them, and just be much, much more comfortable than you'll feel that first couple of times. So As I was saying those first couple of times, my suggestion is always to take a class. You can find a mentor if you have somebody in your neighborhood or if you have a friend. That's great. That's always wonderful. But if you don't know somebody that's willing to teach you how to be a beekeeper, my suggestion is always to go and take classes. You can go on the internet, but it's nowhere near the same as being in the hive and hands-on. So the Monadnock Beekeepers Association has meetings on the first Thursday of the month. And they take place in Keene usually, and they switch off to Dublin every other month, I believe. They may change their schedule, you never know. But go to their website, which is monadnockbeekeepers.com, and they can give you information about their classes. There's other companies in the area that will give classes as well, or mentorship, or answer questions too. So you can pay attention to them as well. And they'll just get you pointed in the right direction, because beekeeping can be very frustrating if you don't know what you're doing or what you're looking at. There's a lot to it, and I just couldn't go through all of this in one show, but there is a lot to beekeeping. The last thing that I want to show you today is what I call a nuke box, and we all call a nuke box actually. Nuke would be nucleus. My feeling is that everybody should have at least one nuke box or more. This is a mini hive. And it's great for when you get a swarm, which is a group of bees that have decided to leave the hive because there's too many bees in the hive, or there's some reason that the queen has decided that she wants to leave the hive. So sometimes you'll be walking along, or you'll see your hive swarm, and you don't want to lose those bees. Bees can be worth about $100 when you have a hive of bees. And that's just a very small hive. So what you want to do is you want to catch that hive if you can. So catching the hive, you can either use one of these boxes, which would be pretty cumbersome, or there's this smaller box. It's got a metal roof on it, and they'll all be a little bit different, but this one has a metal roof and a cover. This box I've had for about 10 years. So what we did a few months ago is we burned the inside of it so that we could kill any bacteria that might be in there. And so we do that periodically just to make sure that we're not bringing on any disease or anything like that. So this hive is big enough for 5 frames. So it's like a mini hive. The good thing about this hive is, and this is not something you'd keep your bees in all the time, but it's good for carrying. On the back, it's got a hole that has a screen. And this screen will help you so that your bees can have ventilation. It gets really hot in this hive when you've got a lot of bees, and it gets hot in any hive. So besides the screened back, there is a screened front, which is this little hole here. So this hole and that hole are open in the summer so that there's ventilation so that it can cool off the bees. If it was really hot, the bees would spend all their time trying to cool off the hive instead of going out and foraging for food. The other thing that I like about this style hive is that there's a hole down here, and this is where the bees will come in and out. This can be closed off. Say you have a robbing situation, because bees are natural. They're fighting for their hives, and they're looking for food. Sometimes the bees will rob. So if for some reason the bees were coming in here and they were taking the food out of this hive, you could close this up. So you could close it up either all the way, you could close it up so that just the worker bees can get out and not the drones, or you can leave it open so that the drones can get out as well. I usually, in the middle of the summer, just leave it open all the way so that the bees can fly as much as possible. But you do have to pay attention so that you don't have a robbing situation. Okay, I think that's it for this. I'd like to show you a little bit about our top bars. The top bar hives are, again, horizontal instead of vertical. And I'm going to take a walk over there. I hope you'll follow me and learn a little bit more about top bars. All right, so this is the top bar hive. I have a couple of different styles. I have this one here, which is called the swarm thrower, and then I also have a larger one, which is called the long hive. These are made by Wild Hive. They're a company that is in Gilsum, New Hampshire, and Bill White is the person that is promoting these. They have a couple of different things that are very positive about these, because this one is easy to move, it's great for pollination, and people just love it because it has a window. And I think I've shown this before on other shows, but there's a window in here. And this window will show what's going on in the middle of the summer. So you don't have to really go into your hive all the time. You'll just open up the window and make sure that you have a lot of bees, and if it's good, then that's what you're happy with. So some people will just take a look inside and get out, and that's it. Now, that wouldn't be my recommendation all the time, because you do need to make sure that you have a queen and eggs in your hive. This hive here was used this summer, but the hive has since died. But it's got a lot of good examples of frames that we use. So that's why I wanted to show you this. When you start off on one of these hives, let me see if I can find it. Okay, I'm going to show you this board here. This board starts out, it's just a piece of wood, but it's been angled here. And so it's been angled, and it also has a little lip here. And that makes it really nice for the bees, because the bees will attach to this and then they'll draw their comb out. So you can see that there has been comb here at some point. This is propolis along the edge. So what they were doing is they were trying to close that off so that there wouldn't be any air coming around. Once they have decided to start drawing comb, this is what it'll look like. It's really beautiful. And this is in the long hive as well. So what they'll do is they'll draw the comb out, and eventually they'll come right to the edges. This is what a frame would look like if it's been in there for a while. And so this darker part is the part where they've had brood and they've used them over and over again. What they do is the bees will go in and they'll shine the cells and then use them again as needed. But you can see there's some areas where it's a little bit lighter. This is where they would have had honey, and this is where they would have had brood. So it's pretty interesting to look at these, and this is all on their own. If you look at this frame as well, you can see how small these frames are here, or these cells are here. And these cells here are much larger. These larger cells would be of brood that was drones. These would be workers, and these would be drones. So the queen knows what she wants. She'll lay the eggs that she needs, and then the hive will go on. So what we do with this hive is we do a little bit of manipulation, but we have a board in here that we call a follower board. I don't see it here right now. Oh, it's actually at the end. This is a follower board. And this follower board allows us to use this hive to the length that we want to at any time. So what we would do is we would put this follower board into, say, 6 or 7 frames in. And as the hive gets bigger or needs more space, we'd pull it back and back and back. So that makes it pretty easy to manipulate and easier on the beekeeper. Now, one of the positive things on this is that you're not hurting your back, because sometimes those hive bodies that we were looking at before, those can weigh 30 or more pounds. They can weigh up to 60 or 90 pounds when they are filled with honey. So these are much easier on your back. You can move this hive very quickly, and if you need to close it up, all you do is you close up this area here with probably a screen, just so that you leave some ventilation for them. But it's really quite easy to manipulate. So I've shown you today the Langstroth hive and the top bar hives. It's really up to you now what your choice is. If you have questions, again, I would consider, I'll answer any questions that you might have, but I would go to like New Hampshire Honeybee, Monadnock Beekeepers, or any other of the companies that are either in our area or throughout the United States and further. They're all over the world. And ask people any questions that you have, but do some research so that when you ask the questions, you know what you're talking about and that you get the right answers. So, we've talked a little bit about beekeeping and how to get started. Today, we've been in my backyard, and if you have any questions about how to become a guest of our show, or if you have any other topics that you'd like us to cover, please do email us. Jenna and myself we're usually here together, but today I'm on my own. But email us both, and it's at inmybackyardch8@gmail.com. So we'll look for you again in my backyard.